Coming up on Primetime News, the Korean government, ruling party and the presidential office meet for the first time in more than 2 months when talks among them were severed over a revision on parliamentary law. North Korea is reportedly gearing up to launch a new long-range rocket to mark the 70th anniversary of its ruling Workers' Party in October. And Korea unveils measures to tackle the country's snowballing household debt, one of the major risks that could hurt the country's growth potential. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, July 22nd. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with our first story. President Park Geun-hye's top aides, top government officials and leaders of the ruling Saenuri Party held a three-way policy meeting this evening, the first of its kind in more than 2 whole months.
It also marks the first such meeting since Prime Minister Hwang Ji-hye took office. The meeting focused on urgent political issues like the parliamentary approval for a supplementary budget and reforming Korea's rigid labor market in the second half of this year. Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Byung-gi said Prime Minister Hwang Ji-hye the extra budget bill must gain parliamentary approval by Friday this week, as releasing the funds in a timely manner is critical to overcome MERS-related damage and to revive the faltering economy.
And in order to do so, Saenuri Party's chairman Kim Woo-sung and floor leader Won Yu-cheol said they will do their best to cooperate with the opposition bloc to meet Friday's deadline. They also stressed that the three entities were on the same boat when it comes to improving the livelihoods of the people.
And for another day, Korean lawmakers failed to reach an agreement over the spy agency scandal and a bill for injecting $10 billion supplementary budget. With both ruling and opposition parties mired in debate, concerns grow that July may come and go with little progress on either issue. Let's take a listen.
The budget supplement is to help cover damages related to the MERS outbreak and the drought and to stabilize the economy. A sufficient reinforcement of funds is necessary to achieve the maximum effect. The bill should be approved by Friday.
The Saenuri Party has refused our demands to raise the corporate tax rate, to reduce the fiscal deficit, and also to hold a parliamentary hearing on the spy agency scandal.
The floor leaders of the rival parties will meet Thursday to close gaps on both issues. Shifting gears, North Korea reportedly upgrades its missile facility that will allow firing a long-range rocket. And according to South Korean military sources, such launch could come later this year. Our Han Da-eun has the details.
This is the Eunha-3 rocket North Korea launched in 2012 from its northwestern Pyeongan-bukdo province near the West Sea. Soon after the launch, North Korea announced the satellite placed inside the rocket was successfully put into orbit. Now, 3 years later, North Korea has completed an upgrade of the launch pad that propelled the Eunha-3, extending the height of the launch tower from 50 meters to 67 meters tall. South Korean military and intelligence sources said Wednesday the upgraded launch site will enable North Korea to fire a long-range missile twice the size of the 30-meter-long Eunha-3. Weapons experts say that means North Korean missiles can now fly further with heavier warheads. They add the upgrade is an indication of the regime's ambitions to fire an intercontinental ballistic missile, which has a range of more than 10,000 kilometers. Military sources in Seoul also believe Pyongyang will test-fire a long-range rocket from the new launch pad around October 10th, which is the 70th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Workers' Party. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
While North Korea moves to heighten military tensions, the United States vows to only engage in talks with Pyongyang when the regime shows the world it's ready to give up its nuclear weapons. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The U.S. State Department has reiterated that Washington can never accept North Korea as a nuclear weapons state. The statement came less than 24 hours after North Korea boasted about its nuclear capabilities and said the world should forget about trying to make it abandon its nuclear ambitions. John Kirby, spokesman for the U.S. State Department, says Washington is open to dialogue with the North, but stressed the onus is on the regime to take concrete steps towards denuclearization before any talks resume. Also on the diplomatic front, Washington's special envoy for the six-party talks on North Korea's nuclear program will visit South Korea, China, and Japan starting later this week. Sources in Washington say Sidney Seiler will embark on his trip to Asia from July 25th. His first stop is Seoul. Seiler is expected to discuss strategies with his counterparts to deal with North Korean provocations. However, there's a widespread view the long-stalled six-party talks are unlikely to resume anytime soon, as North Korea continues to refuse U.S. demands that it first take clear and verifiable steps to show it's ready to scrap its nuclear program. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Civic groups from the two Koreas will meet tomorrow to discuss a possible joint Liberation Day celebration on August 15th. An official at Seoul's Unification Ministry says the government has approved the planned meeting between the two groups. It's scheduled to take place in the North Korean border town of Kaesong. The South Korean group is expected to suggest holding simultaneous joint celebrations in Seoul and Pyongyang. It'll also propose having representatives from the two Koreas attend each other's event. If the two sides agree, it will be the first time in 10 years the two Koreas celebrate Liberation Day together.
Moving on to other stories, in the months leading up to the 70th anniversary next month of Japan's surrender in World War II, the focus has been on the tone and content of a statement to be made by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. According to our Kim Ji-hye, many expressed concerns Abe's version may not uphold the apologetic tone struck in another statement made 2 decades ago.
There's mounting pressure on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to include a clear apology for the country's past atrocities in his war anniversary statement next month. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell told reporters Tuesday that Abe should find a way to give voice to the feelings of remorse the Japanese people feel and have demonstrated, and to include a clear apology for the country's past atrocities. But the general consensus among media outlets in Japan is that Abe will not use the words colonial rule or apology, though he may mention an attack or remorse in consideration of Sino-Japanese relations. Both colonial rule and apology were used in the statement offered by Prime Minister Domichi Murayama in 1995, in which he also offered an apology for the suffering and damage caused by Japan's history of aggression in Asia. If Abe doesn't echo the statement, either in words or sentiment, it's expected to further dent his approval ratings, which have already taken a hit since he pushed through Parliament a set of controversial security bills that will allow Japan to expand its military role overseas. A poll by the Sankei Shimbun and Fuji News Network last weekend found Abe's support rate had dropped nearly 7 percentage points from the previous month to 39%, while his disapproval rating jumped 10 percentage points to 53%. This is the first time since Abe took office in December 2012 that his disapproval rating has exceeded his approval rating in polls conducted by the right-leaning media outlets. Kim Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The Korean government laid out plans to tackle the country's household debt, currently at a staggering $950 billion. The key point of the measures is that the government will make it easier for debtors to repay their loans. But for some, it might not be enough. Our Shin Se-min has the story.
The Korean government and related authorities have unveiled a set of ambitious measures to help contain household debt while promising to maintain policies that will bolster economic growth.
While bank loans have helped spur the housing market, the new measures will ensure household debt does not drag down the economy.
The measures involve tightening the screening process for borrowers and stepping up monitoring of second-tier banks that are subject to looser financial regulations. The Financial Services Commission also said it would restructure loans to encourage borrowers to pay back the principal and the interest rather than just the interest, and drop the ratio of amortized loans to 45% of total bank lending by the end of 2017. Korea's overwhelming borrowing spree has been triggered by eased regulations on loans for real estate and the country's record low interest rate. But experts say the high debt levels do not yet represent an imminent threat.
The top 40% in terms of income takes up nearly 3/4 of the total liabilities in household debt, meaning they're more likely to be able to repay their debt. In other words, it's not a serious issue.
But the bigger problem lies with borrowers in the lower income brackets. The new debt measures fail to address those that have already taken out loans and are struggling to make ends meet, an issue that needs to be addressed with an eye to the long term.
Labor market reforms must accompany the household debt measures, because improving people's ability to repay their debt can only be done by raising wages.
Experts say that while the new debt plans are a step in the right direction, it's necessary to strengthen the lending and repayment system to ensure it is less vulnerable to risks from home and abroad, including the possibility of a rate hike in the U.S. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Less than a year after Korea's first innovation center opened in Daegu, a network of 17 creative economy centers is now complete, with the last center opening in Incheon today. We're already seeing some results from these centers created to support the startup movement, which also has the full backing of the government. Song Ji-sun tells us more about Korea's latest creative center. Innovation centers are at the core of President Park Geun-hye's drive for a creative economy. Since the first center opened in Daegu in September last year, 60 more have opened across the nation, completing a national network with the goal of helping local startups get off the ground. With the help of these centers, large companies based in the region provide startups with their know-hows. The centers also serve as a one-stop shop for everything the startups need, from legal advice to financing and patent applications. The country's last innovation center opened Wednesday in Incheon, with the goal of remaking the western port city into a smart logistics hub. 1/3 of Korea's trade volume passes through the city, and the new center aims to use its strategic location to facilitate exchanges between Korean and Chinese startups. With the center's launch, President Park Geun-hye's creative economy drive is now in full swing.
오늘 인천 혁신센터의 출범으로 작년 9월부터 시작이 된 전국 17개 창조경제혁신센터 구축이 모두 마무리되었습니다. 고유한 특색과 장점을 갖춘 전국 창조경제혁신센터들이 각 지역별 강점과 후원 기업의 역량을 결합해서 대한민국 창조경제를 선도해 나갈 수 있도록 이 자리에 계신 모든 분들이 힘과 지혜를 모아주시기를 바랍니다.
All 17 centers are aiming to keep pace with the changing startup landscape.
It's no longer about securing more funding. It's speed and the ability to adapt to the rapidly changing world that matters. The centers will manage regional resources and grow simultaneously, sometimes through competition and at other times through collaboration.
The Incheon Center is already collaborating with a private startup accelerator called Spark Lab, which now calls the port city home. The company aims to help local startups enter the global market and plans to host demonstrations at the center. The network has already racked up some achievements. Samsung and LG alone have shared over 90,000 patents with smaller companies, and more than 5,000 startups have received advice from the centers on launching their businesses. The task now is keeping the startup movement alive and keeping the center strong even after the end of President Park's term. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's tourism industry is the hardest hit from the MERS outbreak. How adversely affected is it? Korea's central bank chief says the impact could drag down the country's GDP growth by 0.1 percentage point this year. At a meeting with economists today, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said the number of overseas tourists dropped by 53% in June from a year earlier, and he believes a rebound won't be easy in the crucial July-August summer vacation season. He also encouraged Koreans to take their vacations within the country if possible, as that will help the domestic economy recover. Internal reserves held by Korea's top 30 conglomerates grew nearly 6% on-year in the first 3 months of the year. The rise comes despite government efforts to levy tax on excess cash. Data from Market Tracker CEO score shows 268 affiliates of the country's top 30 firms held combined internal reserves of more than $616 billion at the end of the first quarter. That's up 5.7% or $33 billion from a year earlier. Korea's top two conglomerates, Samsung Group and Hyundai Group, accounted for 80% of the increase. Of the 30 groups, 21 reported a rise in their internal reserves, while 8 reported a drop over the cited period. The hike indicates an improvement in the firm's financial health, but experts say it also indicates they have been reluctant to make new investments. Construction of a large-scale oil refinery project in Kuwait will kick off soon, and Korean builders are in the thick of the bidding action. There's hope some lucrative contracts will boost Korea's construction business in the Middle East in the second half of this year. We turn to our Kwon So-hwa for this report.
There is a good chance that Korean builders will win the bid for a large portion of the so-called new refinery project in Kuwait, as they have put up the lowest bid for 4 of the 5 available packages at a total cost of almost $13 billion. Italy and India have the lowest bids for the 4th package, but they're still negotiating the budget with the Kuwaiti side, and another round of bidding has been scheduled. The project has lost momentum since bidding started in March, when government estimates for the cost of the project had to be revised upward, changing the bidding process. But Korean construction companies and the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said Wednesday the Kuwaiti government approved the new budget last week and will select and notify the winners soon. Korean firms didn't have a great showing in the Middle East in the first half of the year, with the region accounting for just 27% of overseas projects. That's less than $7 billion out of roughly $26 billion in orders. This can be attributed to delays or reduction of new orders from major oil-producing countries due to the drastic fall in global oil prices. But with the prospect of the orders from Kuwait, the biggest overseas project of 2015 for Korea, the latter half of the year is looking much brighter on the country's construction front. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
And now for the top international news headlines, we turn to our Lee Sun-ho at the News Center.
Today's focus, Turkey citizens protest after a deadly bombing. A video of Sander Bland's arrest is released, and Apple shows profits despite a drop in its shares.
Well, Sun-ho, let's start in Turkey. The protests have been getting more violent by the day.
Well, their anger is directed at their own government. Turkish Kurds are continuing to express their frustration over what they say is the government's inability to stop the Islamic State. Dating back to Monday, a suspected ISIS bombing attack took more than 30 lives. Demonstrators continue to protest in a town near the Syrian border. The devastating blast took place in southeastern Turkey, which is located just 10 kilometers away from Kobani, a Syrian town where the Kurds have been fighting ISIS. A number of people protested near Istanbul's Karaköy district on Tuesday, shouting in opposition against President Erdogan and the ruling AK party, whom they believe are working with ISIS. The police eventually had to resort to using tear gas and even a water cannon to separate the crowd. Earlier during the day, the Turkish Prime Minister claimed to have found a suspect in the blast.
A suspect has been identified. We are checking for any domestic or international links. As I said yesterday, we believe the link between IS and the suicide bomb attack is clear. I can't say any more until the investigation has concluded.
Now, a mass funeral was held on Tuesday in the city of Gaziantep for 27 of the victims of the deadly attack. Many of them were university students. Over in the U.S., a dashboard camera video of Sandra Bland's traffic stop was released by the Texas Department of Public Safety on Tuesday. The footage showed how the incident started with Bland failing to signal a lane change and escalated quickly to a point where she was placed in handcuffs. The altercation got physical, and the state trooper ended up pointing a taser at her. The 52-minute video was posted on YouTube. Now, controversy over this incident erupted after her death on July 13th, which was ruled a suicide. She was found hanging in her jail cell dead. Authorities have stated that they will investigate the matter as transparently as possible.
It's important that America knows that given everything that's going on in America as it relates to relationships between law enforcement and the African-American minority community, I should say, that we want to make certain that, quote unquote, that people do not perceive this, anything we do as it relates to this investigation, as a whitewash.
Just hours after the video of Sandra was released, her friends and family held a memorial service. Activists claim that this is the latest case of racial discrimination and use of excessive force by the U.S. police. And moving on to tech news, Apple released its quarterly earnings, which just beat expectations with double-digit increases, but the company's stocks fell more than 6%, closing in at $130.75 on Nasdaq. Apple said that it sold 47.5 million iPhones, up 35% from last year, but analysts were expecting around 49 million to be sold. The company itself predicted a $49 to $51 billion in revenues, which missed analysts' average estimate of around $51.13 billion. Economists say that despite drops in shares and the fact that Apple didn't wow investors, the picture was overall good.
Right, so Apple's kind of always a buy the rumor, sell the fact. They tend to trade off a little bit, which they did today on the news. Well, the news is generally very good. 39.7% margin. That is phenomenal. That's 40% margins. So they didn't just hold, they beat on the margin, which is a big number here.
Apple said sales in China more than doubled to $13.23 billion from last year, while CEO Tim Cook said that the company was still proud of its results despite challenging foreign exchange environments. Although there appears to be no doubt about the strength of the iPhone, the new Apple Watch, however, is still shrouded in mystery as the company did not disclose numbers in terms of shipments of the product. And that does it for your international news update today. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
Hot and muggy conditions continued today with sporadic outbreaks of rain. However, it looks like it's going to rain heavily tomorrow as monsoon rain is in the forecast and showers will pick up after 6 p.m. here in Seoul. So if you're in the capital area, take appropriate precautions. And it seems like northern parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do provinces will receive most amount of rainfall of up to 120 millimeters, while the rest will see 10 to 80 until Friday. And the rain should continue for a few more days, including Saturday. So take the weather into account if you plan to be outdoors this weekend. And the monsoon season has almost come to an end, marking the beginning of the summer holiday seasons as well as the sweltering hot conditions. Now, temperature-wise, it should be slightly cooler than today, as the daily high here in Seoul and Daegu will rise to 29, and Gwangju and Busan will top out at 28 and 27. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 28 and 30, while Dokdo rises to 26. And for those in the western and southern coastal regions, watch out. Sea fog is expected to hinder your visibility, so drive with extra caution when you hit the roads tomorrow morning. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Looks like a lot of work before they load the balls, but motivation is fun, right?
I know, exactly. I mean, we should have a lot of fun there maybe
and maybe
next time.
find ways to harness the kinetic energy to power our country. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us.
We'll be back tomorrow at the same time. Goodbye for now.